In the shadow of the Appalachian foothills, where fog clings to abandoned properties like ghosts unwilling to depart, Martha Kowalski discovered a truth so haunting that it changed not only her life, but the very fabric of a community built on decades of silence. When a widow with nothing left to lose inherited a cottage that locals avoided for generations, she uncovered a secret that had been deliberately buried by those who feared its power. If you're watching this from the comfort of your home, hit that subscribe button now and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. You might think you know where this story is headed, but trust me, what Martha found in the walls of that decrepit cottage is something no one could have predicted. Martha Kowalski had spent her entire life working at the local textile mill in the small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. For 43 years, she stood alongside the deafening machines, breathing in cotton dust and earning just enough to keep a modest one-bedroom apartment with her husband, Stefan. They had dreamed of children, but life had other plans. When Stefan passed away suddenly from a heart attack at 62, Martha found herself utterly alone, with nothing but a small pension that barely covered her basic expenses. The mill had closed 2 years prior, leaving Martha, now 65, with no prospects and dwindling savings. Her weathered hands, permanently stained from decades of dye work, were a testament to a life spent in service to an industry that ultimately abandoned her. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in early November. Martha almost mistook it for another bill or perhaps a donation request, but the official seal of Harrisburg County Probate Court caught her attention. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope to discover that her second cousin, Eliza, whom she had met only twice in her life, had passed away 3 months ago. Having no direct descendants, Eliza had left her only property, a remote cottage on 15 acres of woodland near the outskirts of Millbrook, to Martha, her closest living relative. "I remember thinking it was some kind of cruel joke," Martha later told a local reporter. "Who would leave me a house? I hadn't seen Eliza since my wedding day nearly 40 years ago." But the letter was genuine, and the following day, Martha found herself in the office of Gregory Simmons, the county clerk, who handed her a set of rusty keys attached to a faded leather tag. "I feel I should warn you, Mrs. Kowalski," Simmons had said, his voice lowered conspiratorially. "That place has a history. Nobody's lived there for nearly 30 years. Eliza owned it, sure, but she never stayed there. Not after what happened to her parents." When Martha pressed him for details, he merely shook his head. "Just local talk. Nothing worth repeating to a lady such as yourself." The property records Simmons reluctantly shared showed a troubling pattern. The cottage had changed hands 7 times in the past century, with no owner staying longer than 5 years. Most curiously, the property had been sold at significantly below market value each time, as if the owners were desperate to be rid of it. A notation in the margin of one deed transfer from 1978 simply stated, "Seller eager to relocate following incident on property. Buyer advised of circumstances." What those circumstances were, however, remained unnoted. Martha had nothing to lose. Her landlord had recently informed her that the apartment building was being converted into upscale condominiums, and she would need to vacate by the end of the month. With nowhere else to go, and barely enough savings for a security deposit on a new rental, this inheritance, however mysterious, seemed like divine intervention. The day Martha first visited her new property was unseasonably cold for early November. A light snow had dusted the narrow dirt road leading to the cottage, which sat nestled among towering pine trees at the end of a winding path. As she maneuvered her aging Buick down the overgrown driveway, branches scratched against the windows like skeletal fingers warning her away. The cottage itself was a squat stone structure, with a sharply pitched roof and small windows set deep into thick walls. The stone chimney, partially collapsed, rose from the center of the roof like a broken finger, pointing accusingly at the sky. The smell hit her first when she pushed open the weathered front door, a musty, damp odor tinged with something acrid that made her eyes water. Decades of abandonment had taken their toll. Wallpaper peeled from the walls in long, curling strips. The wooden floorboards sagged in places, soft with rot. A thick layer of dust covered every surface, undisturbed except for the tiny footprints of mice or other small creatures that had made the abandoned dwelling their home. In the main room, furniture draped in yellowed sheets stood like silent sentinels. A dining table, 4 chairs, a sideboard with a cracked mirror above it. Martha removed one sheet to reveal a rocking chair, its wood darkened with age but still solid. It was the strangest thing, Martha later recounted. When I uncovered that chair, I felt like someone was watching me, not in a threatening way exactly, but like they were waiting to see what I would do next. The air inside the cottage was unnaturally still, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Martha's footsteps echoed on the wooden floor as she made her way through the small kitchen with its ancient cast-iron stove and hand pump at the sink. A narrow staircase led to 2 small bedrooms upstairs, their doors firmly closed. As dusk approached, casting long shadows through the grimy windows, Martha decided she had seen enough for one day. Despite her financial predicament, she wasn't sure she could bring herself to live in this decaying structure that seemed to emanate a sense of profound sadness. But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A small door no more than 3 feet high set into the wall beneath the staircase. It was the only door in the house that appeared to be in good condition, its wood unwarped by moisture, its brass handle polished as if regularly used. Martha approached it cautiously. According to the county records, the cottage had been built in 1924, and this little door likely led to a storage space under the stairs. Nothing unusual for a house of that era. But why was it so well maintained when everything else had been left to rot? She tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. None of the keys she had been given seemed to fit. As Martha drove back to her apartment that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that the cottage was hiding something. Not just in that locked cupboard, but in its very bones. The next day, she visited the Millbrook Historical Society, housed in a converted Victorian mansion on the town's main street. Elaine Porter, the elderly curator, greeted her with surprise when Martha mentioned the address of her inheritance. The old Nowak place? Porter's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. My dear, what on earth do you want with that dreadful cottage? When Martha explained her situation, the curator's expression softened. I see. Well, I suppose beggars can't be choosers, as they say. But you might want to sit down. There are things about that property that aren't common knowledge outside of certain families in Millbrook. According to Porter, the cottage had been built by Polish immigrants, Jakub and Zofia Nowak, who had come to Pennsylvania to work in the coal mines in the early 20th century. The couple had saved every penny to buy the land and build their home, dreaming of establishing a small farm where they could be self-sufficient. For several years they lived peacefully, raising chickens and growing vegetables in the rich soil of their property. But something changed in the winter of 1931, Porter said, pulling out a thin folder from a filing cabinet. Inside was a yellowed newspaper clipping from the Millbrook Gazette, dated February 12, 1931. The headline read, Local farmer reports strange occurrences at Nowak property. The article described how a neighboring farmer, Robert Jenkins, had reported seeing unusual lights in the woods surrounding the Nowak cottage and hearing unearthly sounds, like the wailing of 1,000 lost souls. Jenkins had also claimed that the Nowak's livestock had begun dying mysteriously, and that crops planted near their property failed to thrive. People were superstitious back then, Porter explained, and the Nowaks were foreigners, which didn't help matters. Rumors spread quickly. According to local legend, Jakub Nowak had accidentally disturbed an ancient burial ground when digging the foundation for their home, unleashing a curse on the property. Others whispered that Zofia practiced old country witchcraft in the woods behind their cottage. Whatever the truth, the Nowaks suddenly became outcasts in the community they had worked so hard to join. The most curious part, Porter continued, pulling out another clipping dated October 3, 1932, is what happened next. This article, just a small paragraph on the 3rd page, reported that the Nowaks had abandoned their property suddenly, leaving most of their possessions behind. Neighbors reported that the couple had fled in the middle of the night, taking only what they could carry. They were never seen in Millbrook again, and no one knew where they had gone. Since then, the property had passed through multiple owners, none staying for long. Each family reported similar experiences: livestock that sickened and died for no apparent reason, crops that withered in otherwise fertile soil, strange sounds in the night, and a persistent feeling of being watched. The most recent owners before Eliza inherited it had been the Miller family, who had fled in 1987 after their 10-year-old son claimed to have seen a woman with no face standing at the foot of his bed 3 nights in a row. "But here's what's truly odd," Porter said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Every family that left, every single one, prospered afterwards. The Johnsons, who owned it in the 50s, went on to found one of the largest construction companies in the state. The Miller's son, the one who saw the faceless woman, later became a renowned surgeon. It's almost as if—" she hesitated, "as if the place drives people away for their own good." Martha left the Historical Society with more questions than answers, and a nagging suspicion that she was only scratching the surface of the cottage's secrets. That night, she dreamed of the small door beneath the staircase. In her dream, it swung open to reveal not a cupboard, but a long tunnel stretching endlessly into darkness. The following morning, Martha made a decision. With nowhere else to go and her eviction date looming, she would move into the cottage. Perhaps the stories were just superstition, as Porter had suggested, or perhaps there was something to them. But if previous owners had ultimately found good fortune after leaving, maybe the cottage would bring her luck as well. At 65, Martha figured she had little left to lose. Over the next few days, Martha spent every waking hour cleaning and repairing what she could in the cottage. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, and swept away decades of dust and cobwebs. She hired a local handyman to repair the most dangerous sections of the floor and to check that the ancient wiring was still safe. The cottage began to look, if not welcoming, at least habitable. Yet the small door beneath the stairs remained locked, its secret safe for now. Martha officially moved in on November 15th. The temperature had dropped further, and the first thing she did was light a fire in the old stone fireplace, which the chimney sweep had declared safe to use. As darkness fell and the wind whispered through the surrounding pines, Martha sat in the rocking chair, now cleaned and polished, and tried to feel at home in her new dwelling. It was past midnight when she first heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere inside the walls. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. At first she dismissed it as the house settling or perhaps a branch against a window. But as it continued, growing neither louder nor softer but maintaining its steady rhythm, Martha realized it was too regular to be random. It sounded almost intentional. Following the sound, Martha found herself once again standing before the small door beneath the stairs. The tapping seemed to emanate from behind it, though it was difficult to pinpoint the exact source in the old house with its peculiar acoustics. Martha knelt before the door, pressing her ear against the wood. The tapping stopped abruptly, replaced by what sounded like a deep, shuddering sigh. Martha jerked backward, her heart racing. Had she imagined it? She waited, but the house had fallen silent once more. Finally, exhausted from the day's work and unsettled by the strange sounds, she retreated to her bedroom upstairs, locking the door behind her, though she couldn't have explained exactly what she was locking out. The next morning, Martha drove into town to visit the hardware store. She purchased a small pry bar, determined to open the mysterious door one way or another. When she returned to the cottage, however, she found something unexpected on her kitchen table. A key. Old and made of iron, it had an intricate design on its bow, unlike any of the other keys she had been given. Martha was certain it hadn't been there when she left. Had she somehow overlooked it during her cleaning, or had someone entered the cottage during her absence? With trembling hands, Martha took the key to the small door. It fit perfectly in the lock, turning with a satisfying click. The door swung open easily, its hinges silent as if recently oiled. Beyond was not a cupboard as she had expected, but a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The smell that wafted up was earthy and damp, like freshly turned soil after rain. Martha hesitated only a moment before retrieving a flashlight from her kitchen drawer. The beam illuminated rough stone steps descending into what appeared to be a cellar, something not mentioned in any of the property records. Cautiously, she made her way down, counting 17 steps before her feet touched a dirt floor. The cellar was surprisingly large, extending beyond the footprint of the cottage above. The walls were lined with rough stone, and wooden shelves held dozens of glass jars filled with unidentifiable substances, powders, herbs, liquids of various colors, In one corner stood a wooden table, its surface stained dark with strange symbols carved into its edges. But what caught Martha's attention was the far wall, where the stones had been arranged in an arch around what appeared to be a small door, similar to the one upstairs but made entirely of stone. Carved into the stone were symbols Martha didn't recognize. Not quite letters, not quite pictures, but something in between. They seemed to shift slightly when viewed from the corner of her eye, but remained fixed when she looked at them directly. A leather-bound book lay open on the table. Martha approached cautiously, directing her flashlight beam at the yellowed pages. The writing was in a language she didn't recognize, Polish perhaps or something older, but interspersed among the text were diagrams and drawings that needed no translation. Detailed anatomical sketches of plants and animals, celestial charts mapping the movements of stars, and most disturbingly, what appeared to be rituals involving human figures standing in specific formations around central objects or symbols. A noise from upstairs startled Martha, a door closing or perhaps a floorboard creaking under weight. She listened intently, but heard nothing more. Still, a sense of unease crept over her, a feeling that she was not alone in the cottage. Gathering her courage, she took the book and hurried back up the stairs, closing and locking the small door behind her. That night, Martha pored over the book, trying to make sense of its contents. Though she couldn't read the text, the illustrations told a story of their own. They depicted the cycle of seasons, the growth and decay of living things, and what appeared to be methods for influencing these natural processes. One recurring symbol particularly caught her attention, a spiral with a small dot at its center, which appeared on almost every page. Martha was startled awake the next morning by a knock at her door. Disoriented, she realized she had fallen asleep at the kitchen table, the mysterious book still open before her. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Hurriedly closing the book and hiding it in a kitchen drawer, Martha went to answer. Standing on her porch was an elderly man she had never seen before. Tall and gaunt, with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes, he introduced himself as Victor Petrosky, a retired botany professor from the State University. "Forgive the intrusion, Mrs. Kowalski," he said, his voice carrying the faint traces of an Eastern European accent. "But word travels fast in small towns. I heard you had inherited Eliza's property, and I felt I should pay my respects. I knew Eliza quite well, you see." Martha invited him in, curious about his connection to her late cousin. As they sat in the kitchen with cups of tea, Petrosky revealed that he had been researching the flora of the region for decades, with a particular interest in the unusual plant species found on the Nowak property. "This land is special," he explained, gesturing toward the woods visible through the window. "The soil has unique properties, mineral compositions not found anywhere else in the region. It produces plants with unusual characteristics." According to Petrosky, Jakub Nowak had discovered these properties shortly after settling on the land and had begun experimenting with cultivation of rare medicinal herbs. Jakub was a healer in the old country, Petrosky continued. Not a doctor by modern standards, but someone who understood the healing properties of plants. When he discovered what could grow here, he realized he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. The story Petrosky told diverged dramatically from the local legends Martha had heard. According to him, Jakub had successfully grown plants with remarkable medicinal properties. Herbs that could reduce fever in hours, roots that could ease the pain of arthritis, flowers whose extract could calm the most troubled mind. He had begun treating neighbors quietly, asking only for small payments or favors in exchange for his remedies. But then came the drought of 1931, Petrosky said grimly. Crops failed across the county, livestock died, people grew desperate, and desperate people look for someone to blame. According to Petrosky, rumors spread that the Nowak's apparent immunity to the hardships afflicting their neighbors was due to some form of dark magic or pact with evil forces. The truth, that Jakub had simply prepared better and understood how to nurture plants even in harsh conditions, was ignored in favor of more sinister explanations. "The night the mob came with torches, the Nowaks fled through the cellar," Petrosky said, watching Martha's face carefully. "Yes, I know about the cellar. Eliza showed it to me once, though she never ventured down there herself. The Nowaks escaped through a tunnel that led to the woods. They made their way to Pittsburgh, then west to California. But Jakub left something behind, something he had spent years creating. Martha thought immediately of the strange book in her kitchen drawer, but said nothing. Instead, she asked, "How do you know all this?" Petrosky smiled thinly. "Because Jakub Nowak was my grandfather. My mother was born in California in 1934. She told me the stories, and when I became a botanist, I sought out this place. That's how I met Eliza. I approached her about studying the plants on this property." A chill ran down Martha's spine. "And did you find what your grandfather left behind?" Petrosky's expression darkened. "No. But I believe you have, Mrs. Kowalski. The book. His grimoire, as he called it, though it has nothing to do with magic despite what superstitious locals might think. It's a careful scientific documentation of his work, with the unique plants of this region and their medicinal properties." Martha hesitated, then retrieved the book from the drawer. Petrosky's eyes widened at the sight of it, and his hands trembled slightly as she placed it on the table between them. "May I?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Martha nodded, and he opened the book with the reverence of a priest handling sacred texts. "This is it," he confirmed after examining several pages. "My grandfather's life work. Mrs. Kowalski, do you understand what you've found? This book contains formulations for medicines that modern pharmaceutical companies would pay millions to acquire, plants with compounds that could treat conditions that currently have no cure." Martha thought about the strange cellar with its shelves of jars, the carved symbols, the stone door that seemed to lead nowhere. "There's more than just the book," she said quietly, and told Petrosky about the cellar and what she had found there. As winter deepened, Martha and Petrosky spent countless hours in the cellar, cataloguing its contents and deciphering the grimoire. The professor translated the Polish text, revealing detailed instructions for cultivating and preparing various plants. The jars on the shelves contained preserved specimens, seeds, and prepared medicines, many still viable despite the decades that had passed. But the stone door remained a mystery. It had no visible handle or lock, and the symbols carved into its surface defied Petrosky's attempts at translation. Word of their work spread through the community, despite their efforts at discretion. Some locals viewed their activities with suspicion, the old rumors about the Nowak property resurfacing. Others, particularly those with chronic health conditions that modern medicine had failed to alleviate, approached Martha cautiously, asking if she might have something to help ease their suffering. Following the instructions in the grimoire, Martha began preparing simple remedies: teas for insomnia, salves for arthritic joints, tinctures for persistent coughs. To her amazement, those who tried her preparations reported significant improvements. A retired miner whose lungs had been damaged by years underground found he could breathe more easily. An elderly woman with gnarled hands from rheumatism discovered she could knit again without pain. A child who suffered from seizures went 3 months without an episode after taking drops prepared from a pale blue flower that grew only in the shadowed area behind the cottage. As spring arrived, Martha and Petrosky began planting some of the seeds they had discovered, following the grimoire's meticulous instructions for soil preparation, planting depth and care. The garden behind the cottage came alive with plants unlike any Martha had seen before. Flowers in colors that seemed to shift in different lights, herbs with leaves that trembled at the lightest touch, roots that grew in perfect spirals. One evening in late April, as they worked in the garden under a full moon, Petrosky made a discovery. A particular arrangement of plants, when viewed from above, formed the same spiral symbol that appeared throughout the grimoire. As the moonlight touched the center of this spiral, where a small star-shaped flower had just bloomed, a sound like distant chimes filled the air. Inside the cottage, something responded. Martha and Petrosky rushed inside to find that the stone door in the cellar was glowing faintly, the carved symbols illuminated as if lit from within. As they watched in astonishment, the door slowly swung open, revealing not another room or tunnel, but what appeared to be a garden identical to the one they had just left, yet bathed in daylight, though it was nearly midnight. "A portal," Petrosky whispered, his scientific skepticism momentarily abandoned in the face of the inexplicable. My grandfather found a way to bend space somehow, to create a protected place where his most precious plants could grow undisturbed by seasons or outside influence. Through the doorway, they could see an expansive garden enclosed by a high stone wall. Plants of every description grew in careful arrangements, many species neither of them recognized. At the center stood a tree unlike any they had ever seen, its bark a deep iridescent blue, its leaves silver on one side and gold on the other. Hanging from its branches were fruits that glowed with a soft inner light. "The tree of life," Petrovsky said in awe. "My mother spoke of it, but I always thought it was just a story, a metaphor for my grandfather's work. But he actually created it, or found it perhaps, a hybrid of species with extraordinary properties." According to Petrovsky's mother, Jakub had spent years developing this special tree, whose fruit contained compounds that could potentially extend human life by decades, healing cellular damage and rejuvenating aging systems. It was this, more than anything, that had made the Nowaks targets of suspicion and fear. The idea of such power in the hands of immigrants, outsiders, had been too threatening to the established order. In the days that followed, Martha and Petrovsky carefully explored the hidden garden, documenting its contents and collecting samples for analysis. The fruits from the central tree, when tested, revealed compounds unknown to modern science, molecules with the potential to revolutionize medicine as they knew it. But with this discovery came a dilemma: what to do with such knowledge? Pharmaceutical companies would pay billions for exclusive rights to these compounds. Governments might seize the property for national security if they understood its true value. Religious authorities might condemn their work as interfering with divine will. The hidden garden was both a treasure and a potential source of danger. After much deliberation, Martha and Petrovsky made their decision. They would establish a foundation dedicated to researching and developing medicines from the plants in the hidden garden, with profits going to provide health care for those who couldn't afford it. They would share their knowledge, but carefully and gradually, ensuring it couldn't be monopolized or weaponized. News of the Nowak Foundation for Botanical Medicine spread rapidly. The same community that had once driven Jakub and Zofia away now celebrated Martha as a visionary who had brought jobs and attention to their struggling town. The cottage, once shunned, became the administrative headquarters for a research facility that attracted scientists from around the world. As for Martha, she found herself at 65 embarking on an entirely new chapter of her life. The widow who had inherited a cottage nobody wanted had discovered not just material wealth but purpose, a legacy to carry forward. The mysterious sounds in the night had ceased, and though she sometimes caught glimpses of movement from the corner of her eye, they no longer filled her with dread, but with a sense of companionship, as if Jakub and Zofia approved of what she had done with their life's work. The cottage that had driven away so many others had become her true home. And perhaps that had been its purpose all along, to protect its secrets until the right person came along, someone who would use its gifts not for personal gain, but for the greater good. The widow who had lost everything had found something far more valuable than material wealth. She had found her place in the world, and in doing so had transformed not just her own life, but countless others. Yet one mystery remains. On certain nights when the moon is full and the spiral garden is in full bloom, locals report seeing strange lights around the cottage and hearing what sounds like distant chimes. And some claim that Martha Kowalski, though now approaching her 80th year, looks no older than the day she first arrived. Is it merely the benefit of her medicinal plants and a life of purpose? Or has she perhaps tasted the fruit of the tree of life? That is a secret she keeps to herself, along with whatever else might lie beyond the stone door beneath the stairs. If you enjoyed this extraordinary tale of discovery and transformation, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories of hidden treasures and forgotten places. Share this video with someone who appreciates the power of perseverance, and check out our recommended videos for more shocking revelations from ordinary people who found extraordinary things. Remember, sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the places that everyone else has abandoned. Content generated by artificial intelligence.